Hello and welcome to MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. My name is Dr. Alapasurlicker and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the west of Scotland. Like many of you, I spent a lot of time commuting. This was valuable time that I could have spent revising for the MRCPsych examination. And so, I've started this podcast to help you revise on the go. Each episode breaks down one high-yield topic mapped to the syllabus. This is then followed by 5 questions to help reinforce your learning. So, grab your headphones, turn travel time into revision time, and let's get started. In episode 15, we introduce trait and type theories of personality. We briefly discussed how Hans Eysenck proposed a model of personality based on 3 major dimensions, known as the Penn model. In this episode, we build on that foundation and explore Eysenck's theory in detail, including its biological basis and why it remains clinically relevant today. Hans Eysenck was a German-born British psychologist who became one of the most cited and influential figures in personality research during the 20th century. Eysenck was dissatisfied with purely descriptive approaches to personality. He wanted to explain not just what personality differences looked like, but why they existed. His approach was empirical and biological. He used a statistical technique called factor analysis to identify the underlying dimensions of personality, and he grounded these dimensions in neuroscience and physiology. This distinguished Eysenck from earlier trait theorists such as Gordon Allport, who focused on identifying and cataloguing traits, and from psychoanalytic theorists such as Freud and Jung, who emphasized unconscious processes. Remember, Eysenck used factor analysis to identify personality dimensions and proposed that these dimensions had a biological basis. Eysenck proposed that personality could be described using 3 broad higher-order dimensions. These were psychoticism, extraversion, and neuroticism. Together, these are often referred to as the PEN model. Each dimension represents a continuous spectrum. Individuals do not fall neatly into one category or another. Instead, they sit at different points along each dimension. Remember, the Penn model consists of 3 personality dimensions: psychoticism, extraversion, and neuroticism. Let's begin with extraversion, as it was the first dimension Eysenck developed and the one with the most detailed biological explanation. Extraversion refers to the degree to which an individual is outgoing, sociable, and seeks stimulation from the external world. Individuals who score high on extraversion tend to be sociable, assertive, talkative, and sensation-seeking. They prefer novelty and activity. Individuals who score low on extraversion, that is those who are more introverted, tend to prefer solitary activities, are more reserved, and may find excessive social interaction draining. Eysenck proposed that extraversion has a biological basis rooted in cortical arousal. He suggested that extroverts have lower baseline levels of cortical arousal compared to introverts. As a result, extroverts seek out external stimulation in order to raise their arousal to an optimal level. Introverts, on the other hand, have higher baseline cortical arousal. They are therefore more sensitive to stimulation and tend to avoid excessive external input. This arousal theory offers a physiological explanation for why introverts and extroverts differ in their preferences for stimulation, social interaction, and novelty. Remember, extroverts have lower baseline cortical arousal and seek stimulation to raise it. Introverts have higher baseline arousal and are more sensitive to stimulation. The second dimension in Eysenck's model is neuroticism. Neuroticism refers to the degree to which an individual experiences emotional instability and a tendency toward negative emotional states. Individuals who score high on neuroticism may experience anxiety, worry, moodiness, irritability, and emotional reactivity. They tend to respond more intensely to stressors and take longer to return to emotional baseline. Individuals who score low on neuroticism tend to be emotionally stable, calm, and resilient under pressure. Eysenck linked neuroticism to the reactivity of the limbic system, which governs emotional responses. He proposed that individuals high in neuroticism have a more reactive autonomic nervous system. This means that in response to stressors, they experience a more pronounced physiological response, including increased heart rate, muscle tension, and activation of the fight or flight response. This heightened reactivity makes them more vulnerable to emotional distress. Remember, neuroticism reflects emotional instability and is linked to heightened reactivity of the limbic system and autonomic nervous system. The third dimension is psychoticism. Psychoticism does not directly refer to psychosis as a clinical condition. Rather, it describes a personality dimension that reflects traits such as aggression, impulsivity, coldness, egocentricity, and a disregard for social norms. Individuals who score high on psychoticism may be hostile, antisocial, manipulative, or indifferent to the feelings of others. In extreme cases, high scores have been associated with antisocial and psychopathic traits. Individuals who score low on psychoticism tend to be more empathic, agreeable, warm, and socially conforming. Eysenck proposed that psychoticism was related to levels of testosterone and dopaminergic activity. Higher testosterone and dopaminergic activity were thought to be associated with higher psychoticism scores. It is worth noting that psychoticism was the most controversial of Eysenck's dimensions and has been the most debated in the research literature. Some researchers have suggested that this dimension overlaps with what later models describe as low agreeableness and low conscientiousness. Remember, psychoticism reflects traits such as impulsivity, aggression, and reduced empathy, and is thought to be linked to testosterone and dopaminergic activity. One of Eysenck's most distinctive contributions was his attempt to root personality in biology. He proposed that personality traits are not simply learned behaviours or social constructs. Instead, they reflect underlying differences in neurophysiology that are largely inherited. Eysenck estimated that genetic factors account for a substantial proportion of the variance in personality traits. This view was supported by twin studies which consistently showed higher concordance for personality traits in identical twins compared to non-identical twins. This biological perspective positioned Eysenck's model as one of the most scientifically grounded theories of personality available at the time. It also opened the door to future research linking personality to genetics, neuroscience, and psychopathology. Remember, Eysenck proposed that personality traits have a strong genetic and neurophysiological basis, supported by evidence from twin studies. Eysenck developed psychometric tools to measure his personality dimensions. The most widely used was the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, often abbreviated as the EPQ. This self-report questionnaire measures scores on each of the 3 Penn dimensions. It also includes a lie scale designed to detect response bias, that is, a tendency to present oneself in an overly favourable light. The EPQ has been widely used in research settings and has been validated across many different cultures and populations. Remember, Eysenck developed the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or EPQ, to measure the 3 PEN dimensions, along with a lie scale to detect response bias. Eysenck's model has significant clinical relevance for psychiatry and psychology. High neuroticism is one of the most robust personality predictors of vulnerability to mental illness. It has been associated with increased risk of anxiety disorders, depressive episodes, and general psychological distress. High extraversion has been associated with better social functioning and, in some studies, a degree of resilience against low mood. However, very high extraversion combined with high psychoticism has been linked to impulsive and risk-taking behaviours. High psychoticism scores have been associated with antisocial personality traits, substance misuse, and difficulties with emotional regulation. Understanding where a patient sits on these dimensions can help clinicians think about patterns of behaviour, response to treatment, and interpersonal difficulties. For example, a patient with high neuroticism may require greater support for emotional regulation, while someone with high psychoticism and impulsivity may need targeted interventions addressing risk-taking and interpersonal conflict. Remember, high neuroticism predicts vulnerability to anxiety and depression. High psychoticism is associated with antisocial traits and impulsivity. Understanding PEN profiles can inform clinical formulation. Now, let's test your recall. I will read out 5 exam-style questions. After each one, I will pause for 10 seconds so you can attempt them before hearing the answer. Question 1. What are the 3 dimensions in Eysenck's personality model? Psychoticism, extraversion, and neuroticism, often remembered as PEN model. Question 2. According to Eysenck, why do extroverts seek out stimulation? Because they have lower baseline cortical arousal and seek external stimulation to raise it to an optimal level. Question 3. Which biological system did Eysenck link to neuroticism? The limbic system and the autonomic nervous system, which show heightened reactivity in individuals high in neuroticism. Question 4. What does high psychoticism reflect in Eysenck's model? Traits such as impulsivity, aggression, egocentricity, and reduced empathy, linked to testosterone and dopaminergic activity. Question 5. What tool did Eysenck develop to measure his personality dimensions? The Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or EPQ. Let's summarise what we have learned today. Hans Eysenck proposed that personality can be described using 3 broad dimensions: psychoticism, extraversion, and neuroticism, forming the PEN model. extraversion is linked to lower baseline cortical arousal, leading extroverts to seek external stimulation. Neuroticism is linked to heightened limbic and autonomic reactivity, resulting in greater emotional instability. Psychoticism reflects traits such as impulsivity and reduced empathy, and is associated with dopaminergic and hormonal factors. Together, these ideas make Eysenck's PEN model a foundational theory of personality that is directly relevant to the examination. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MRCpsych on the Go Revision Essentials. I hope this episode helped to move your revision forward. If you have any questions or just want to continue the discussion, you can find me on LinkedIn at MRCpsych on the Go, spelled MRCPsych on the Go. This podcast is about making revision accessible. If you found it useful, liking and sharing it with others helps the goal more than anything else. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Alapas Ehrlicher, and as always, keep revising on the go.